Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Todd Stoll. I'm the current Gen President, as well as Vice President of Education at Jazz at Lincoln Center. And we are here this evening, to talk about jazz education as a tool for racial understanding, healing, and justice, a very important topic to our nation and to the world right now. And I'm going to hand this next part of the welcome off to Sean Jones, the next president, and as well as Lonnie Davis, our president-elect. Sean?
Thank you so much, Todd. It's good to be here discussing such an important topic. And this topic is not isolated to this moment. This topic is something that has been a part of the fabric of jazz education, music education, and American society from inception. And it's an honor to be here with you all discussing it. I just want to begin by talking about my own personal experiences in jazz education, starting off from elementary school, middle school, high school, up through college, just briefly. And one of the things I want to discuss is some of the barriers that were either purposefully put in place or just were in place based on a lack of understanding in what to do, or because certain things have always been the norm with music education. And this couple things are the notion of sight reading and the idea of excuse me, of really garnering certain theoretical concepts from a European classical standpoint. And again, seeing and developing those skills as I was growing up and learning music, both being denied certain things because I wasn't the best reader or I didn't understand certain theoretical concepts right away. And also getting to college where actually some colleges did not accept me, which I will not name their names, but some colleges would not accept me because even though I could do certain things on the instrument, my sight reading wasn't as great or my theory exam wasn't as strong. And so I made it a point to get into music education, not to address specifically these issues, some of the challenges that I had, and also saying many of my peers who didn't make it. I was one of the ones that fought it out, stuck it out in spite of, and I'm here today, and we're going to institute and help folks institute various changes along the way. That said, I would like to hand it off to our president-elect. Am I allowed to say that now? If I'm not, it's too late. Our president-elect, once I become president, Lonnie Davis.
Thank you, Sean. And I am also very honored, happy to be here to have this very important conversation. It's one that has been necessary for a very long time, and I am glad that we now have the platform to speak about it. So I'm going to also speak about my background and my experiences. I'm actually privileged to be from the city of New Orleans. I see that as a privilege because New Orleans, as you know, is a very special city in the sense that it, is part of the foundation of American music and has a very unique connection to the African diaspora, the global African diaspora. And so, everyone in New Orleans, African Americans in New Orleans, understands that connection, to the drum, and the connection to the Caribbean, and all of those things that are culturally rich and that really what makes the music what it is. And so being from a city like that, there are certain things that are very organic. And so music education is one thing that has been a very organic process. Everyone is a musician. Your postal guy is a musician, your plumber's a musician, and they're pretty good, but they're, of course, brilliant music educators in the city of New Orleans. And, I had the honor of learning from many of them from elementary school through high school. And I was exposed to jazz and jazz education in middle school. Mr. Jonathan Bloom was the first person that I encountered, and he shared some jazz standards, some traditional jazz with us, and later on many others. And I can go down the line, but these, my education primarily came from African American men, just so happened to be men, but they were very embedded, in the culture, of the city. They are very grounded, in its traditions, and they shared those experiences with their students. And so, because of that, I've always felt that I had a sense of groundedness and a sense of support to become a musician, to go after, doing really whatever I wanted to do, because there was never a sense of you can't do this or you shouldn't be doing that, just because it's been such a strong part of the culture. And so I think I'm very lucky, because I was surrounded by lots of support, lots of folks that really cared, about me learning and, others learning. And, in the same sense, not only did, that natural environment help shape and support who I am, but just, being able to speak with those educators and learn about their challenges, and all of the hardships that they went through just to become music educators, to be able to teach this music to someone like myself, all of the things that they had to do, and all the struggles. And so those are things that I've really embraced. Those are experiences and stories that, I still reference today. And I think, I consider those things as I launch, my own programs here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I try to do my best to, make sure that I have that groundedness and the understanding and bring that history and that cultural understanding with me as I share the music with, students of the next generation.
Thank you, Lonnie. If I could just say something about my background very quickly. I spent 24 years in public education in Central Ohio. I was born in Springfield, Ohio, about 40 minutes west of Columbus. Worked in a large suburban school district, as well as ran a community organization in Columbus called the Columbus Youth Jazz Orchestra. But one of the things I've noticed just in general, and since I've been at Jazz Living Center for almost a decade, and I'm sure Sean and Lonnie can both speak to this as well, is that music education at many levels, especially at a national level or a festival level, competition level, is overwhelmingly white. It's white, it's male, it's affluent. And it made me really start taking a look at the systems that are in place that prevent students of color, students from communities that aren't as well funded. Why is it that we have this representation problem? Not to mention the education system Sean was referring to earlier, that are already biased and set up against Black students and students of color, and students not from affluent neighborhoods. I once had a panel of band directors at a band director workshop I was hosting, and I included band directors from different parts of the country and Title I schools to well-funded schools, and they were talking about fundraising. It was a panel of 5 of them, and they were all talking about different ways they fundraise to try and get equipment for their students or whatever. And we got to a fairly affluent director at the end who was legendary around the country, and a really good guy. Like I like him a lot. But he said this. He said, "We've never done a fundraiser. All I've ever done is ask my parents, meaning band parents, and they write checks." Now you have to imagine the astonishment of some of the other directors on the panel, but it was a perfect example of what privilege and what white privilege really is all about. When you're taking a trip to Europe, or you need a new Barry sax, or you have 2 different types of private lessons for your white students, and kids in Black neighborhoods don't have access to instruments or even classes themselves. I think it's a moment for all of us, whether we're teaching elementary school or whether we're teaching at the university level, to look at the inherent systemic racism of how we do business and how we are going to, create new models that allow representation by more students. Sean, Lonnie.
That's all right. Thank you, Todd. That's a very important part of the discussion. And I'd like to move now to a few questions that were submitted and also some of your questions online. Thank you so much for submitting those questions. We have several dozen questions and comments from folks. And again, the engagement is wonderful here. Thank you so much. I want to start with a question that we received. And I'll read the question and then I'll respond. Historically, race issues have been fought by people of all hues. Albert Murray simplified this by stating, racial conflict in America has always been black and white versus white. It seems now it has become a total division and an either or situation. As a white male, I can't help feeling I am lumped into an all white category, relegated as an opponent with nothing I could do or say to help fight the fight. Are we black versus white, or are we humans fighting for systemic change? How can we overcome judging a book by its cover and fight the system together? That's an excellent question. And I want to address this two different ways. The first that you've probably seen and you've heard various folks say, they have said that you are not our ally. To me, that gets into semantics because it's important to understand that with any word, there are variances of the definition of that word. And with the variances, you have to take things along with the spirit in which they're being presented, okay? And so if someone tells me I'm your ally and they're excited, they want to work with me, they want to create change, then I'm going to say, hey, let's go do it. And I'm not going to get into the semantics of the word ally, okay? I'm not going to do that because the English language, as we all know, is a tricky thing. The other side of that is that you have folks, and this is historically true, you have folks that come along the way that are white folks that will say, we want to help and we want to do good things, but then they want to receive a trophy for doing so. They want to then get credit for doing so. They want a pat on the back then for doing so. I need everyone to understand that this is the bare minimum that we need right now. When we're talking about equity and we're talking about all coming to the table to do the hard work to right the wrongs that are so prevalent in not just our music institutions of higher learning and learning in general, but in our institutions at large, all of us that know better have to do better. And the reward is that things will get better. That is the reward. So when you hear an African-American person, and I actually technically don't like the term African-American, and I'm going to explain that in a second. When you hear Black folks say, you're not our allies, what we're saying is, you are our brothers and sisters. You are right there with us. We are all feeling this in a certain way together. Okay, so we all have to do some hard work right now and have some hard discussions. And it's not about fatigue. Okay, I get tired doing this thing all day long. But you know what? The stage doesn't care how tired you are. And the world right now is our stage. All right, and we have to all do better. So thank you for that question. And just briefly, the notion of being called an African American. When you're called an African American or an Italian American or something like that, basically what they're saying is, or the understanding that I know based on definitions that I've read ad nauseum at sometimes, is that that means that you were born in that place and you came here. I was born in Warren, Ohio. So I'm American. I'm American. Okay? I was not born in Africa. My people are of African descent, but I'm American. And I think that that's part of the discussion as well. We're all Americans, yes, descended from other places. So I just wanted to address that as well. Can we get some questions going that are live? Can we see some of those? And we're going to address that in different ways. Do we have anybody else that want to address that question?
I think that was a great question. I actually see it differently. I see I see folks of all colors, coming around this issue and supporting what's right. I don't see the racial line between black and white kind of split, and, black folks fighting for rights for black people, and, white people on this other side doing something else. I don't see that at all. I see, folks making decisions based on what they believe is right. And there is no color line there. Yeah, that's really what I wanted to add to that.
That's so important. Thank you so much for that. Mm-hmm. Todd, if you don't have anything to add there, I'll go to another question. This is a question from Alan. Hey, Alan. I can't see you, but it's good that you're here. Thank you. Question from Alan. What are your tips or recommendations in dealing with or confronting an older generation of university alumni and donors who are against newer policies that are aimed at creating a more diverse and welcoming student body? That is a wonderful question, And I'm just going to be frank in saying that you have to be willing to lose. You have to be willing to lose them. You have to do all that you can to say, hey, we're making progress. We want to be equal. We want to have equal opportunities for everyone. And frankly, we want to represent the music that we are performing. And, Alan, I want to add one other type of person to that equation, and that is older colleagues that you have to teach with that resist the notion of change, that are tenured faculty of 30, 40, sometimes even 50 years that say, no, this is how we've always done it. The change is going to be difficult, and we are going to lose people along the way. Some people cannot grasp the fact that someone like me, even though I've practiced my butt off, even though, I have a history of working with every type of person, even though, I have a great time with everyone. Some people just can't take the fact that my skin looks a certain way. And so you can't save everybody. And I just want to mention a brief story. And you may know this story, Alan. There's a little girl walking with their parents on the beach, and the little girl, the waves wash the shore, and they wash up a bunch of seahorses. And the little girl runs up to the seahorses, right, and starts throwing them one by one, back into the ocean. And the kids' parents say, you should stop doing that. You're not going to save them all. But then the little girl looks back at them and says, it's okay. At least I can save a few. That we got to have that mindset. And as painful as it is, you got to be willing to put some things on the line. I live my life on the line every day when I walk outside. Literally, when I walk outside. I don't know whether I'm going to come back or not. And it terrifies me because I have a 3-month-old now. A 3-month-old daughter. And when I leave every day, I don't know. if I'm going to be the guy or the woman or whoever it is that won't make it back. And so I need my colleagues of all races to be willing to have at least a level of that sacrifice. At least a level of that sacrifice, because this is going to be hard. It's going to be so difficult, and it's going to be ongoing. I saw something online a couple of days ago. Someone said, I'm tired of seeing all these posts. I'm exhausted. Well, I'm tired of living the way I'm living. Well, you live in an amazing country. You can get this, you can get that, you can get that. Yes, 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 yes. I can go to the store and freely purchase some bread. Wonderful. There are some great things about America. But the fact that I have to fear for my life while I'm purchasing that bread is a problem. And I know that we're on here talking about jazz education and how that relates, but it starts there. It starts with broader society awakenings that will then go into what we're doing. That's a great question, Alan. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I'll chime in a little bit. Alan, I mean, you're going to have to do the kind of work that Sean has described, but also there is an undeniable benefit to integration. And you can point that out. First of all, you can just point out all the triumphs of the beginnings of this music, right? So you can point out all the artists, but you can also point out just how anything that's integrated is always more successful. Whether that's business, whether that's corporations, marketing. Integration is not just spiritually and humanly good for us, it's also good for business, which is not the conversation we want to have. But again, when you're talking with folks who have been entrenched in this, you have to try and move. And I'm with Sean, is you have to be willing to risk your job, which is not even close to people who risked their lives, who founded our music, who toured in the South, all the way up to Sean Jones, who walks out his door every day. So, you've got to be able to risk something, but you also need to just keep chipping away like every single day. And the systems are the same, whether it's higher education or whether it's elementary school. The systems are the same. We've got to do better with our systems. Somebody was talking to me earlier today about, how they don't have any black kids in their band. And I said, well, what's your band, your band system? Well, to be in jazz band, you have to be in marching band. You have to be in concert band. You have to come up through this. I said, everything you just said is a barrier that you've put up in front of some black kids or some poor kids or some Hispanic kids or girls. You've put these barriers up. We've got to figure out a way to dismantle systems that allow kids to have opportunity. One of the great school principals I ever had, if he's watching, Dr. Keith Bell, hello, Keith, told me once, we keep acting like it's our education. It's the kids' education. It's not ours. And we create systems so we can control things. And those systems have been run by white men for hundreds and hundreds of years. We've got to deconstruct the systems and allow kids to have access.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Todd. Lonnie, anything you want to add to that? Or?
Yes, I do want to piggyback on what Todd said and just share that I live here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and our main school system is CMS. And we have the most segregated school system in the entire state of North Carolina, which means that the music programs are also that segregated. And so that is a problem. And it's a problem because these students, are not able to interact with students who look different than them, or learn from a band director that looks different, from them. And that's, there are not a whole lot of lessons in that. And so it's a problem for us. And so my organization that serves these students coming from different schools, we do what we can to bring these kids together. I mean, they're working with each other in ways that they wouldn't, necessarily be able to work with students who look different than them at their own school. I think if you are one of these band directors and, you have a jazz band, you want your students to learn this music, I think it's very important that there is, some additional education and research, and humility, I think, from your part that goes into it, and the students as well. That's something that, we do our best to teach. But I think it's very important that not only are the students, learning about, all the technical stuff involved with the music, but, that the spirit of the music is reflected in what you're teaching, and that you're able to make outside of school, you're able to make some real connections with the community, in which this music came from, perhaps, reaching out to some of the elders in your community and learning from them, learning the stories, and some of the hardships and things that they had to go through to be able to live, in this society, or be able to produce the music that you're now teaching your kids. I think that's very important, because otherwise the students are not going to get the full picture. They're not going to get the full scope of what this music, where this music came from, or what it represents. I think that's very, that's very important. And as I mentioned, bringing, coming in with some humility and being humble, and being empathetic. I think that's very important. And having an open mind, perhaps visiting, a Black church, or a church, in the community, not, for the sake of just doing it, but, going in with an open mind and an open heart, and really trying to make some solid community connections. Because what you bring into the band room and what you present to those students, I mean, they pick up on it, your perspective on life and on others. Those students, certainly do pick it up. I know I learned a lot, from the band directors and the musicians that taught me, and I carry some of those lessons with me till today. And so, if those things are not reflected and shared, in the band room, then I think there's a missed opportunity that, perhaps as an educator, that it didn't happen. So I think it's very important, because educators in general, they have, a great opportunity to impact, in a very positive way, the future. We as educators oftentimes have an opportunity to work with students for 3 or 4 years at a time, and, build these very intimate relationships with our students, and they trust us. And so I'm just suggesting that, we take full advantage of that opportunity and give them the very best comprehensive music education that we can give them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. We have a question from David, and I want to tie this question in to a question that was submitted online. And the question from David is this: how do you suggest that teachers and students in traditionally rural and socially isolated academic settings connect more meaningfully with the authentic history and origins of the music, our music? That's a great question. I just kind of want to dive into a little, just briefly, what Lonnie mentioned. She mentioned the Black church. Wherever you are in the world, I'll say the United States, excuse me. Wherever you are in the United States, you're going to find a Black Baptist church. You're going to find a Black Pentecostal church. You're going to find something like that. And just go there one Sunday. Go there and get the vibe of the Spirit. Go there and really understand call and response. Actually, I grew up in the Church of God in Christ, which there are studies that say that the Church of God in Christ is one of the only lasting connections to the original oral tradition of call and response, all right, that is in our music. So go there, check it out, sing along with the choir. And when I was growing up, we basically, we sang our way through the church service. There was very very little talking. So go check that experience out. Also, if you're in a rural area, go and find them. You have to go and check out cats. You have to go and put APBs out there. If you don't know, ask people, where are some of the musicians? Go to the, go visit your, like for instance, I was in Warren, Ohio, grew up in Warren, Ohio. It's not as rural as some places, but it was rural. I had to go to Cleveland, okay? That's 50 minutes up the road. Pittsburgh's 50 minutes up the road. Start asking some of those young musicians to come in. Also, it's just in the music itself. So take that music, rehearse your ensemble, playing Black music, playing Count Basie, playing Ellington, getting it as authentic as you possibly can, Thad Jones, those types of folks, and go out there and play it in your communities. And when you announce those tunes, let folks know who they are. Tell them Duke Ellington is undoubtedly America's most prolific composer, okay? Wrote over 2,000 songs. Give them a little bit of a history to go along with that, all right? Share with them some books, okay? That actually had a question that someone asked, what are some of the books that I could share with my students, okay? I'm just gonna tell you a few, all right? One of them is called Blues People, right here. Blues People, written by Leroy Jones, okay? It says the Negro experience in white America and the music that developed from it, okay? Another book, Lying Up a Nation, Race and Black Music. Ronald Radano, okay? Lying Up a Nation, that's a great one. Another one, The Untold Story of Smoketown, the Other Great Black Renaissance, okay? That's written by Mark Whitaker. One of my favorite books ever, written by the great Dizzy Gillespie, To Be or Not to Bop. It's an amazing book, okay? Fantastic book. And my good friend, John Edward Hassett, excuse me, Jazz, the First Century has a lot of wonderful things in there. Also, Duke Ellington's autobiography, Music is My Mistress. That's another great one. You can start there. But you could also suggest.
I can jump in with a couple.
Yep.
Man, check out, Ralph Ellison, who wrote Invisible Man, has a whole book on essays in jazz that is great. Albert Murray, Stompin' the Blues and The Hero in the Blues are great books. Some people think it's controversial, but Stanley Crouch has some great books out, including Kansas City Lightning, the first half of his biography on Charlie Parker, as well as a lot of other books, including Considering Genius, which I think is a great book on just American kind of cultural commentary. I'm a big fan of the Ralph Ellison writings on jazz, which are awesome. I mean, he knew Duke Ellington, he knew these people, and he was part of that scene.
Yeah, that one is a fantastic one. Yeah, that's definitely one. And we'll put this up on our site, make it accessible to you. And this will be an ongoing conversation. So we'll continue to do this more and more. We have more questions here that are coming.
Can I say something else, Sean? I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. The medium is just weird.
We're together.
Another thing, the Jazz Icons DVD series, which you can just pull up most of it on YouTube, but take some time to stop rehearsing. We've got to engage our kids intellectually and not just with a horn in their hands.
Yes,
so
yes.
Take a day, take a day every week and play a video of whether it's Dizzy's band or the Basie band or the Ellington band, and talk about it with your kids and show them these, some of these concert videos have interviews as well. There's some, especially with Dizzy. Dizzy did some amazing interviews. Take some time and then assign homework. Find a collection of 20 YouTube links and assign them to each kid in your band to go home and watch them, and then write either some questions about it or some discussion topics. Don't rehearse all the time. Stop rehearsing. Talk to your kids in your band. I'm done.
That's fantastic. Todd, you actually addressed one of the questions here, which is how do you engage folks that are resistant to discussing it in the classroom. And to just kind of go along and add a little note to what you just said, there are going to be those that resist. And I think the question you want to pose to those folks is that if you love this music the way you say you love it, then you'll also love the primary creators and contributors of the music, okay? And then people can get into this discussion. They'll say, well, jazz is African rhythm and European, European harmony. Okay, there you could even argue that, but I won't get into that. The thing is, you got to remember about the ingredients of anything. Salt does not determine what Italian food is. The Italians that put the ingredients in the bowl mixed it up and presented you that wonderful lasagna, that amazing red sauce, the tradition of what they have turned those tomatoes, that pasta, all of that stuff in it that is not necessarily of Italian, the country origin, but they know how to take those ingredients and they put it together. Now we got Italian food. Well, in order to love jazz music, you got to love the people that put the blues in the pot and stirred it. You got to love the people that put the rhythm that they brought with them and the harmonic components of it and the elements and song forms and all of that they learned or grasped or changed a little bit upon getting here. You have to be able to do that. And if you can't do that, if you just can't grasp that notion, then perhaps the music is not where you need to land. You cannot love Black music without loving Black people. You can't do it. And you could hear people that try, but it doesn't work, right? I just want to, we had one of the ideas from the survey, which is wonderful. This is from Monk Rowe, who's the director of Phileas Jazz Archives in Hamilton College. This is a wonderful offer. He says, an offer of a resource. Their collection has 400 videotaped interviews with jazz artists containing a significant number of excerpts dealing with jazz and race. Says, I'm willing to share these excerpts if it sounds of interest. Monk, if you're listening, please. Thank you so much for that. We would love that. That would be amazing. And we will work to make some of these materials accessible in a way that is amenable to you. Great, thank you. Lonnie, would you like to chime in on anything that's been discussed or said thus far?
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more in the comment that you just made about embracing the music, but not willing to embrace the people. That's impossible. You know, I mean, the people certainly created the music, and so it's a package deal. Like it all goes together. And so, you know, I can only, you know, kind of consider what we have done, you know, and what we do in our program. It's so important to introduce the music and the history at the same time, and do it and make sure that you're doing it with students that, you know, as young as possible, so that they understand, you know, from the beginning and make the correlation, you know, between this great music and, you know, these heroes that and sheroes that created the music. There is no way to get around that. And I think that is a problem. You know, in general, that is a problem to want to separate those two things. And so, yes, tons of videos. Yes, take the horn and sit the horns down for a second and let's just talk about this. You know, let's talk about why we play this music, why they play this music, and you explore and figure out why you want to play this music. You know, what is your why? But you have to have one, but perhaps your why will be influenced by, you know, the folks who created the music's why. So I think it's important that, you know, students understand the why, you know, and you know, where this music actually came from, being able to share those anecdotes, about, the struggle and, and just the origins, of the music. I think that's very important. There's no separation of people and the art form, itself.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I want to jump to some questions from, actually, I want to tie these two questions together, if it's okay. And that is from Brian and Christopher. Brian's question is, how does the lens through which we assess students affect students of color? School acceptance, competition, scholarships, grades, etc. Christopher's question is, what are your thoughts on decolonizing jazz theory and improvisation pedagogy? Here are my thoughts. I gave you just a little bit of my story coming up. Much of what we do as Black people is through the oral tradition. For example, when I was growing up in church, the first scale I learned was this. But I played it like this. I didn't know that was a D flat pentatonic scale. All I knew was what the organist was playing. Okay? Also heard this. Guess what that sounds like? Sounds like the bebop scale to me. I didn't know it was the bebop scale. All I heard was growing up. Okay? So I knew these things. And when I say I knew these things, I knew them. The oral tradition of what we do. A-U-R-A-L, or however you spell it, oral tradition. So the way to address these things is that has to go into what we do much more. One of the biggest issues, in my opinion, is that upon entrance to any conservatory, you have to take a theory test or some type of theory exam or entrance exam. And those exams are largely, if not completely, based in European classical theory and pedagogy. Well, that is not where most Black people come from. Okay, we don't hear that way, we don't understand that way. And so we struggle putting what we already know here to what we see on the page. And what we need professors to do is, since these things are already in place, what we need to do is two things. We need them to say, okay, look, this is this chord. This is how it is associated with what you do, okay? And then we need to revamp our theory courses to address those things, okay? That's my job. That's why I got into music education, because I was that cat that made it by the skin of his teeth because I could play, okay? It is my job to write curriculum, address curriculum that fits inside of the broader scope of what the university and these institutions do, while creating specific lanes that address American music, okay? American music can't necessarily be taught through the European classical lens. We have to understand that, okay? All those upper extensions, all those things that you deal with, root, movement, form, structures, all of that, how we deal with the rhythmic aspect of it, okay? Why is it that when you go to a university, you have to take 2 years of European classical theory, of which 9 times out of 10, you don't use any of that stuff, okay? Also, what we have to do is we have to integrate our curriculums. What I'm starting to see now, and it frightens me, is that you have these jazz tracks, and the jazz cats don't talk to the classical cats in classroom. They hang out together, but in the classrooms, there's separation. I could go to a certain school, excuse me, and go completely and study jazz without ever going over there and taking a counterpoint class. We have to revamp all of that. And that is part of the work that I'm doing. Y'all want to address that?
Hey, Sean, so I have a question for you. So this has come up in conversations I've had a lot with folks in higher education. You know, a lot of schools, as jazz majors, you have to take a classical audition. You have to play a classical piece. Just like you said, you talked about, you know, folks have to take basically a Eurocentric theory class. What are your thoughts on that particular, you know, studying of classical or Eurocentric music for jazz majors? I mean, my answer to this is always, we should make all the classical players play a blues on their audition. But what's your take on the study of you know, Eurocentric music for students who are jazz majors?
Well, I think it's important to understand that pedagogy has been coded primarily for various instruments, piano, trumpet, certain instruments. The pedagogy, the how-to of the instrument has been coded in the European classical tradition over several hundred years. And frankly, it works for pedagogy. And so we should not eliminate that. Cats should have to take some lessons that deal with etudes, European classical etudes. I just believe that. You want to be fundamentally sound, okay? What's good for you is good for you, regardless of where it comes from. Now we're talking about the music. Once we get into the music, I don't believe you need to do that for an audition to show someone that you can play an instrument. If someone comes in and plays Oleo for me, I'm going to know if they can play the instrument or not. I'm going to know if they have range. I'm going to know if they have the proper technique, things like that. I'm going to know if I can work with them. So that should be eliminated as part of auditions, okay? Regarding school acceptance and things like that, it's the same scenario, okay? You can know if somebody can play. You'll know if someone can play or not, okay? Now, when we're dealing with assessments, that's part of addressing or addressing in a different way how we teach. The assessments come because of what we teach. We have to change what we teach and how we teach it. Otherwise, people are going to continue to fall behind. Black folks are going to continue to fall behind. And frankly, if a school is not ready or equipped to change these policies and things, call someone like me who can help you. Okay? Call your colleagues and say, hey, you know, we're working on that and we want to make things more accessible and frankly relevant in a lot of cases. You have to understand, we're teaching young people. They want to play the music that they're influenced by. Okay? American music. We live in America. This is America. Jazz is America's music. So why are we still teaching it from a European classical standpoint? It makes absolutely no sense. None. And the students are understanding that. They're starting to say, why in the hell, I'm just going to say it, am I paying $60,000 a year to go to school to study some stuff for 4 years, 2 years or 4 years of theory going down this lane when it's not relevant to what I'm playing? Okay, we gotta revamp all of these things, okay? Because they're catching on. Our young people know what's up. They know what's up more than we do. Okay, so we have to serve them a little bit better that way. And anybody want to, Lonnie, you want to jump in on that, or you got something to add there? No? Okay.
No, I don't have anything to add to that. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. We're running short on time. I want to get to our last question. And our final question is, and again, I want to thank everybody for chiming in here. I want to congratulate Todd on his last couple days as president. Todd, you've done an amazing job and you've set us all up very well. And I just want to virtually applaud you and your work, man. Thank you so much. And you left some big shoes to fill. and I'm going to do my best, man. Just, put them in the washer and dryer for me so I can fit.
Thank you, Sean.
And we're also going to continue with this discussion. We're going to do our best to try to potentially do this monthly. Stay tuned for more details on that after we talk to folks. I want to thank Jesse Nolan and Sharon Birch for their work in facilitating this. Thank you so much for the hard work. We're going to get to our final question. It says, where would you point the people who don't know where to start, want to do well, but flounder because it seems daunting to discover the origins of world they don't know? What a perfect final question. And I would say you have to start with your beginning. You have to start where you are. There is no perfect place to start. There's no perfect place to start learning music and learning jazz. The perfect place to start is pick up that record and put it on and ask questions. Try to play it. Now, when you're talking about dealing with these issues specifically, ask people, ask your friends, ask your colleagues. Say, hey, man, I don't know what to do. What would you suggest? Vote is one. Vote. You got to vote. That's extremely important. Look at policy. I'm a big policy person. Change doesn't happen by just talking about it. And talking is important. The conversation is extremely important. But if all you do is talk and there's no policy change, then nothing changes. Also, just how we deal with these things in higher academia, I point to myself. I decided that I was going to get into education, so I'm deciding that I'm going to dive deeper and deeper and deeper into policy and structure, okay? We need more Black deans. We need more deans that are women. We need more folks in power positions that are Hispanic, Asian. We need to reflect the broader lens of what America truly is. Out of many, one. E pluribus unum. We got to become serious about that. And in order to become serious about that, we have to be in these places, okay? And so I would say, again, start here. You've already started. You've already started. You started by chiming in here. You started by saying, oh, man, I don't know about you, but I was a little bit uncomfortable an hour before. I was like, oh, man, I don't know how this is going to go. But you started. You took the leap. You said, I want to learn. I want to do better as a person. And we all want to do better as a person. And I want us to all remember that. And as we come to a close to this, America is a wonderful place. It's a wonderful experiment that those cats came up with. And they came up with this, by the way, as a protest. This country was started because of protest. Okay? So we got to keep that spirit going. And we got to keep the spirit of e pluribus unum going. Out of many, one. I'm connected to all of you. I am all of you. And I also see how you are different from me. And I'm going to celebrate that difference because it's something that I can learn from. It's something that I can get better at. I can grow because you're different from me, and hopefully vice versa. And that being said, it is now 6 p.m. and I want to thank everybody. Stay tuned for more updates. Check us out, jazzednet.org. We got a lot of wonderful things coming up. We're excited about it. And I am truly honored to become your president of the Jazz Education Network. And if there's something I'm doing that you got questions about, call me to task, okay? I represent you humbly, and thank you all so much.